Morning, everyone. Brian, can you mute everyone, please? Oh, you already did. Okay, thank you. Brian, we need you to mute everyone.
Everyone's muted.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We've had a bit of a technical switch around. Today, Dov Bear is traveling back from the north of Israel and unable to join us today. We apologize for that. However, on a positive note, we have a very special guest today. I'm really, really happy to have him with us. He's a dear old friend of mine. His name is Henry Harris. And he's a consultant and performance coach, works with Fortune 500 CEOs, Wall Street managing directors, as well as regular teens, moms, dads. He runs an awesome organization called jewishwellbeing.org, which you can check out. And he does a lot of work connected to successful living, sharing in a very developed way many of the core principles that we share on Justifi. And he'll be speaking straight after me today. I'm going to just do an introductory breathing with everybody, just to try and focus everyone in. Now, as everybody knows, we're dealing with a really crazy, intense time in the world right now. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of argument, there's a lot of strange perspectives and obvious perspectives that are floating around. And I just thought it makes sense maybe for us to kind of really focus in a little bit on the session today, kind of quieten down our minds from all of the really terrible noise that's going on out there, and try and find a little place of calm inside of ourselves so that we can connect to some of the ideas that you'll hear today and the beautiful people that are going to be sharing today. Celeste, who you'll meet later, is an unbelievable human being. She's been living in Bangkok for a long time now and runs an unbelievable cafe working with the transgender population and victims of human trafficking, and just a very deep soul, a very profound soul. And I think everyone will get a lot from listening to her. But what we want to do now is, before we hand over to Chanech, is just to take 60 seconds, 90 seconds, so everyone can close their eyes, straighten your backs, and just take some really deep breaths in and out. Okay. I like to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth, but whatever works for you guys. So let's just start with 5 deep breaths. As you keep on breathing, please just continue to breathe. Just try to relax your shoulders. Be conscious of your body, be conscious of your shoulders, be conscious of your back. Just try to relax them down and at the same time relax your mind. Like I said, there's a lot of noise at the moment, a lot of really bad things been happening, a lot of craziness, a lot of uncertainty. And let's just try and kind of appreciate each other and really focus in to be present here, and to shut everything else out, to be as healthy as we can be on the insides right now, and just to access that part of ourselves that can listen with an open heart, fully focused. Let's open our eyes, and I'd like to introduce my dear friend Henry Harris, who's going to speak for about 15 minutes now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just want to say a good morning to everybody, and thank you so much, Jamie and Brian, for inviting me to step in and share a thought. I'm looking today to share a distinction that's been very meaningful to me, a distinction between pain and suffering. My experience is that I'm okay. I'm on board with a certain amount of pain in life. I'm less on board with suffering. The question is, what is the distinction between those things, and what role can we play? We're experiencing, as Jamie alludes to, there's a lot of pain going on in the world. That pain can it can morph into suffering. And we're not here to suffer. We're here to deal constructively and be in constructive pain. So let's jump in and let's see how this kind of points to a certain understanding about psychological experience, spiritual consciousness. So I'm going to give a couple definitions to start, because otherwise, what are we talking about? So I'm going to refer to pain as it hurts, but there's by nature something that there's a clear cause and there's a sense of purpose associated with it. So for example, when I think of a couple examples that come to mind about pain for me is fasting on Yom Kippur. It hurts. There are definitely moments during the course of my fast on Yom Kippur that I'm in pain. Staying late to work, staying late to finish a deadline when I'd like to be leaving my work, it also hurts. There's a letting go of like expectations that I don't really want to do sometimes. But there too, it's like, okay, there's a clear cause and there's a sense of like, where's this going? Another typical example might be going to the gym. You know, there's pain involved in being in the gym, but I can be with those pains. Whereas suffering, I'm going to suggest suffering is the opposite. Suffering is pain that does not have a clear cause, and it does not have a sense of purpose. It seems pointless. It seems to be, there's no context to it. And there's a sense of like, what's this for? Like, why is this necessary? You know, a person who's struggling with chronic anxiety might feel that that's suffering. A person who might experience chronic depression or chronic conflict, that can take on the feeling of suffering. Now, the question I'd like to propose is, what role do we play in transforming suffering to pain, or the opposite? What role do we play in pain taking on the shape of suffering in our lives? Okay, so in order to illustrate this, I'm going to share with you a very powerful metaphor that Jewish wisdom points to. Jewish wisdom says that the main children of successful people are their spiritual accomplishments. Your main children in this world, thank God my wife and I have a bunch of kids. Jamie has a bunch of kids. Brian, whoever's on this call has kids, whether you don't have kids. Your main children in this world, according to Torah wisdom, are your spiritual accomplishments. Iker toldoseim shel tzadikim, the main offspring of successful people are masim tovim, are their good choices, of their spiritual accomplishments. Now, what that tells me is that there is a parallel between spiritual accomplishments and what comes as a result of labor and delivery. There is a labor and delivery involved in the birth of a child, and there is a labor and delivery in the bringing forth of a spiritual accomplishment. Does that make sense so far? Just give if for those who are on the screen, not ahead, if you can sense that. Okay, good. So there is a labor and delivery. Now let's take two types of ladies to illustrate where and how pain and suffering can kind of come to life. Let's take a lady who, strangely enough, she's 9 months pregnant, or she's at the end of her 9 months of term of carrying, and for whatever reason, she doesn't know anything about pregnancy. She doesn't know why she's got this big tummy. For whatever reason, let's not get into why. She just doesn't know anything about the presence of this, you know, why she's got a big tummy. She doesn't know anything about labor, etc. Now, she's sitting and she's having a coffee, and all of a sudden, the muscles of her uterus contract significantly and painfully for somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds. And then after that duration, the muscles ease, And then somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes later, the contraction, the uterus contracts again powerfully. Now, either if you'd like to type on the chat, or if you'd like to kind of unmute yourself, I don't know if Brian, if they can unmute themselves, what would you describe, how would you describe the psychological state of mind, the feeling experience, the likely feelings of this woman who knows nothing about pregnancy, who starts to undergo this involuntary process of contractions? What feeling? I don't know how to see if there's somebody typing something. Let's see. Fear. I would guess absolute fear. Terror. Yes, yes. I would think that terror would be an appropriate feeling state for a woman who undergoes an involuntary, completely consuming pain that comes, surges, and then dissipates, and then surges again, like existential crisis. Yeah, I would say that that's a reasonable feeling state. Now contrast that with, now that would be a good example of terror, of suffering. That would be a good example of a person whose pain, it lacks context completely, and it seems to lack purpose or point of any kind. Now, obviously, contrast that with a woman who knows about pregnancy and labor. The contractions, she knows what's going on, and she's anticipating the arrival of a new child, and then the contractions begin. Now, do the contractions hurt this woman who knows about pregnancy? Does she feel physical pain? Obviously she does, right? But there's a completely different psychological landscape for such a person, because she is aware of the context and the meaning and the purpose behind her pain. Now, I would like to suggest to you, and not only that, she doesn't take it personally. The sense of powerlessness feels normal. The sense of being out of control feels normal. She recognizes that the pain that she's in is, it hurts, and yet it is safe. It hurts, and yet she can be there in that contraction. Now, I would like to now bring us back to the initial notion that the main children of a person, of a successful person in this world, are his spiritual accomplishments, are his great choices. And with that and here's my takeaway from that. There are times where I experience a surge of intense feelings, of intense, painful feelings. For me, and tell me if, type in the chat if you have this experience as well. Do you get times where you get a surge of strong, overpowering feelings? Those feelings might be fear, or they might be fear or anxiety. They might be jealousy or shame. They might be regret, or just a sense of totally out of control. There are surges that can arise in a person that can feel overwhelming. And in the process of encountering those surges, we might not understand. We might look around and say, what is going on? Like, where is this coming from? What is this about? And we look for a cause, and we might look to pin it on something, but ultimately it would be a misunderstanding. The reality of the human experience is that we're encountering a series of contractions and expansions in our consciousness. We are experiencing a series of contractions and expansions in consciousness. And guess what? In the same way that the woman who's giving birth, she's not the author of those contractions. She's not the quarterback who's determining the beginning or the duration, the intensity. And a woman who understands the reality of what she's encountering, it hurts a lot. And yet she has the freedom to be in those contractions. there's a fascinating medical phenomenon that a woman who is deeply fearful of a contraction, a woman who is deeply fearful of the labor process, guess what? There's an internal nature to which she is resisting the contractions. Medical establishment has shown that that internal fear, that internal resistance to the process of labor and delivery, it actually it intensifies and prolongs the labor experience. In our own lives, we are experiencing a phenomenon of there's a spiritual root to our psychological consciousness. There's a spiritual actor, a divine energy that is part of our kind of spiritual, our psychological landscape. And that's why we can undergo surges of intense feelings, that there's a part of us that might be inclined to want to run away. Like, I can't be in this. This is dangerous. This is unsafe. This is shameful. I need to run away. And in a sense, that would be a misunderstanding of the opportunity, of the tremendous spiritual opportunity. So what I'm inviting people to recognize is that there is not a person in this world that does not undergo the ongoing nature of contractions and expansions in spiritual consciousness. The capacity to be, to recognize and appreciate the safeness, the safety of those contractions is part of how we can transform the experience of suffering to pain, and thereby participate in a beautiful way with the bringing forth of new life, literally new life. The spiritual accomplishment is a form of new life that we get to be partners in bringing forth in this world. That's the metaphor. Jamie, I'm just looking at my time. I don't know if I have a couple moments for comments or questions, or if we need to transition.
You can definitely take 2 minutes, no problem at all. If people want to type or unmute to ask a question, you should feel comfortable.
Any thoughts or comments? What is that? Does that resonate with you, or is there a question you have? Can you see how you are undergoing a birthing experience in the course of your life that involves involuntary contractions, but that are ultimately safe? I can. Okay, good, Jamie. And you know what's interesting is that to consider that it's fascinating to note that the circumstances of our lives that can arise as like, that is totally stressful for me. My job is very stressful to me. Speaking publicly, my relationship with my parents, my single status, my financial status, all of those things can and do look like sources of tremendous difficulty at times. But it's fascinating to consider that it's not static. It's not consistent that we experience a given event, a given interaction, a given relationship as difficult. There are times where we experience a contracted consciousness in the face of a certain relationship or endeavor. And there are times where we experience a more peaceful kind of more equilibrium. This points to the reality that there is there's an inner world that is unfolding that we are not the author of. We have a role in our understanding of it. We have a role in our way of relating to it and our being present to it. But we're not the complete authors of our psychological experience, and neither is the world out there. And that ultimately is my experience, is that it can lead to a tremendous freedom, the freedom to be with what we're experiencing. There's a tremendous beauty in the ability to be with what it is that is unfolding internally.
I just want to thank you very, very much, Henry. That was amazing and awesome, especially at the time of Corona, and there's just, the world is, contracting and expanding all around us at the moment, and who knows what the heck's going on, right? And it's a bumpy ride. So really, really timely and appropriate words, especially in terms of, the additional challenges going on in the States and around the world right now in terms of just all the anti-racism stuff and all the uncertainty. So thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. And to everyone here, I'm just going to pass you over to Ilana.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hi, everybody. Hope you had a lovely week and a lovely weekend. Okay. So today's topic is, it's a very simple one, actually. It's one of those ones that sounds very obvious when you hear it, and then when you realize that you're not doing it, you're like, okay, we have to rethink this. So I want to talk about the role of giving and being kind and wonderful and magnanimous and considerate of the other person, and the role of being selfish, whatever room there is for that during dating. So this is a phenomenon I see very often, because we all know that if I was to tell you what relationship would work better, a giving relationship or a selfish relationship, what would you say? Yeah, right, giving. Okay, so that's an easy one, and this is true in a relationship. There's giving. Now the giving can get complicated because I have to give to myself, but I have to give to my spouse, and sometimes there's a conflict, so we have to know how to balance that. There's lots of wisdom for how to navigate making sure everybody's being given to. But everybody knows that selfishness doesn't really have much space in a relationship, not in a healthy relationship. So what people tend to do is they tend to bring this this character trait of like being very giving and considerate into their dating experience. And this is where things get a little bit complicated, okay? Because it could be dangerous to be in too much of a giving mindset when you're dating. What does that mean? That means that, sometimes we can overlook the negativity in the person that we're dating. Sometimes we can be very worried about how they're feeling. Sometimes we can be, we can sort of be really, really conscious of their experience and somewhat forego our own. These are all things that we do in giving. Giving versus selfishness. When I'm being selfish, I'm focused on my experience, I'm focused on my needs. And when I am giving, I am, sort of strongly conscious of your needs. So I want to state this, and I want you to feel free to disagree, but I'm going to throw this into the bucket of all your principles, so that you can use your own intuition to know when it's time to pull it out, because obviously it's subtle, and we're not going to turn away our niceness. It's not about not being nice. It's always time to be nice and to be kind. When we say selfish and giving, what we're meaning over here is who we're prioritizing. Okay. Now you can have some person, you have some friends who are really mean, but when you dig below the surface, you realize that in their meanness, they're always being really, really nice. This story is that story of the miser who's being horrible to everybody, but he's like giving them quietly. Right? You got people who are a bit mean. Okay? I'm not talking about your sweetness or your personality trait, and you've got people who are so sweet when they tell you that they can't help ever. In such a nice, kind way. Okay, so we're not talking about the nature with which you interact. It's always important to make people feel wonderful. It's always important to to be as amicable as possible. Like be a nice person. What we're talking about here is who you're prioritizing. And here's the deal. Okay, dating is selfish, and dating needs to be selfish. Because when dating isn't selfish, it backfires. If when I am dating, I am entirely worried about you and how you feel and what your needs are and all the rest of it, and I'm putting myself aside, I run the risk of hurting you enormously by making a decision that didn't really focus on myself. When you are dating, you can be as nice as you want, but the mindset has to be selfish. The way that I put it is, this is the selfish process of whether you are the person that I want to spend the rest of my life giving to. This is the selfish process of me deciding whether you are going to be the person I spend the rest of my life giving to. You need to make sure that you're making a good decision, and you're making a good decision for you and for the other person. If you make a selfish decision that this is the wrong person for you and you don't marry them because they're not the right person for you, that's also, by the way, going to end up being a good decision for them, because if they're not right for you, it's not really possible that you're right for them. But when we go into giving, into dating, where I'm going to close my eyes to all their faults, I'm going to be worried if they're going to get hurt and all the rest of it, what we risk is getting seriously involved in a relationship that had we had our eyes more open, we would have recognized was a mistake. And as a result, we're going to end up hurting ourselves and the partner much worse. But because we care and we're taught so often to give, we run the risk of feeling guilty about making selfish decisions when we're dating. When you don't make selfish decisions when you're dating, you end up hurting both of you. Okay? So this is the principle. It's not about niceness. It's not about kindness. It's not about consideration. It's not about communication. It's about the recognition that my job when I'm dating is to not get caught up in a relationship that's a bad idea for me, and not to get over involved in it, and not to get blinded by it, not for your sake and for my sake. And my job is to be able to have my eyes open enough for what my needs are, to be able to move away from a relationship that I know deep down isn't good for me. That's not selfish, that's responsible. Don't play married when you're dating. Don't play the games that you will have to when you're married, which is, oh, there's a big fat fault. What do? I know, I'll just close my eyes really tight because I'm stuck with this person. Yes, when you're married, you got to do everything you can to make it work because you're in and you're committed. When you are dating, you're in a process of the verification of whether this is the person that you are consciously deciding to close your eyes to when they do something that's not okay, or to confront them or whatever it is. But you're taking responsibility for being in that relationship. A selfish dating process gives you a much stronger chance of a giving marriage process than if you make the mistake of treating the relationship that you're trying to decide upon as if you are completely committed to it. You are not committed until you are standing under a chuppah. And by the way, I'm going to take this one step forward. Yeah, this is also true of engagement periods. Engagement period is a time to double check your decision before you throw yourself into that full commitment. Once you leave the chuppah, there's no longer you and me, it's we. You're in. Until that point, the ability to say, this is wrong, I have to pull back, this is wrong, I have to say no, this is wrong, I have to stop this, because it's not right for me, it's not selfish, it's not nice, it's responsible. If I could unwind so many of those couples who are too nice during their dating periods, it might be easier for them to walk into marriages that they were able to stay in properly. It is a short-sighted thing to treat the dating process like it's a complete given. It's not. It's a verification. You have to have your eyes wide open. You have to be able to say, this isn't right for me, and you have to say that confidently. This is a big theme. Jamie and I were discussing. We're preparing our. This is a little bit of what's it called? A spoiler alert, right? But in our next Instagram video, we're going to be talking about what we discussed a few weeks ago, which is about being too picky. And I've really been thinking a lot since we discussed it, but one of the things that's really struck me as important is the ability to make confident no decisions. Like very often the reason why we hesitate is because we're in hesitation mode, we're in hesitation mindset. And when we are very confident, we're in confident mindset, right? So a person who's in hesitation mindset is making hesitant yeses and hesitant nos. A person who's in confident mindset is making confident yeses and confident nos. It doesn't matter what the answer is. It's got to be the right answer to the best of your ability. But you've got to make it with confidence. If you're in a relationship and you know it's wrong, it's not a mistake to be selfish about it and to say this is a mistake, we have to break it off. It's responsible. It's your right. You're not committed yet. From commitment, we move completely into giving mode. It's a shift, and it's a shift that has to be really embraced. But the more you had your eyes open, the more you were honest with yourself, the more you were willing to say, I'm sorry, we have to say no to this. This is a mistake, because you were confident about the decisions you were making. And the basis of the decision is this the right person for me? Is this the right person for me? Not do they like me? How will they feel if I break off? Is this the right person for me? The more likely you're going to be able to walk into that real commitment and say, I made such a good confident decision because I said yes to this with the same confidence with which I said no to the previous, that when things go wrong, I'm still in because I came in confidently. Okay, so it's all about confident decisions, and the basis for a dating decision is the simply selfish question of, is this the right person for me? Now, am I the right person for them as part of that selfish question? Okay, am I the right person for them as part of that selfish question? I remember when I was dating, the question of am I right for you was part of my selfish process. I didn't want to be stuck in a marriage where I felt insecure because I had nothing to offer. You can ask real questions and they can be both-sided. But what I'm doing is I'm verifying whether I can put my money behind this decision for life. That is, it's not a time to forgo your own needs. It's a mistake. And it's not, again, it's not the kind of selfish that is uncalled for. You know, there's this idea in Jewish thought that everything has its time and everything has its place. You know, so like I had this beautiful idea. It's a real Justifi idea. But somebody said that everything has its time and its place. So one smart aleck put his hand up and he said to the rabbi, "Really, Rabbi? So when is there a time to be an atheist?" Okay, so they're a good question. So the rabbi thought about it, and the rabbi said, "There's a time to be an atheist." So he said, "When is there a time to be atheist?" And he said, "When somebody else is in pain, don't wait for no God. You go help them." Okay, it was a beautiful answer, right? There is a time for selfishness. The time for selfishness is when I'm in the process of deciding whether I'm going to be giving to you forever. Okay, I have to ask all the selfish questions. Am I attracted to you? Do I like you? Do I want to be with you? Can I handle your weaknesses? You know, do you want the same goals as me? And if at some point you hit one of my non-negotiables, it's okay that the answer is no. Because this is what it means. If I make a selfish decision that I want to spend the rest of my life giving to you, I have a much, much better chance of giving to you successfully with my whole life than if I made an irresponsible giving decision that I didn't want to hurt your feelings and we've been together for so long and I don't know. Okay? Do I see a hand? Is that a raised hand? No. Aviva, do you want to say something? No. Okay. So that's it. Like, I'm trying to remove the guilt that we have over here. There is no guilt for making strong, selfish decisions, especially when we're making selfish decisions to give. It's a bit like saying, you know, I don't want to have a child until I'm ready. Okay. Yeah, correct. Don't have a child until you're ready. That's a good idea. It's not fair on the child to do that, you know, otherwise. We have to know when is the time and when is the place for what. Blind giving can start to happen once we're into that commitment. Until that point, and again, I don't mean engagement, I mean really under the chuppah, when we turn, what Amy always says, we turn the me into we, you know, that's it. I'm gonna stay in with my eyes closed as much as I can. I'm gonna try and ignore your faults. I'm gonna love you, you know, wholeheartedly. But until that point, I have to make sure that I'm making a good decision for me. Ultimately, a good decision for me will be the better decision for we. So that's the message. I hope that relieves you of some of the guilt of having to pull away from relationships that aren't good. You know, yeah, that's how we do this. We see this as a responsible process, not as a romantic process. I don't like seeing couples play house before they're in a house, okay? Because then you feel terrible if you're not being. No. This is not about. This is not about skipping the process and getting, you know, to the romantic part. The romance comes actually afterwards, if you like. Meaning you can have as romantic a process as you want, but there's something much more romantic in an environment of security than there is when you're trying to assess things. You know, you are not dating well unless the entire way through the dating process you reserve the right to say no. At the point at which you lose the right to say no, you're no longer a discerning dater. Okay, you know, that's what we have to do. We have to reserve the right to pull out and say no until we are totally sure of our decision. Okay, so I don't know if that was confusing to anybody. Let me know if you like. Let me know with your heads if you know what I mean. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So good. So hopefully that'll be helpful, and I will pass you over to the team. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Alana, so much, so appreciative. We have Celeste McGee with us, which we're so happy to have you. So unmute you here, Celeste. Okay, Celeste is an amazing partner and friend of Justifi. We're so appreciative he was able to go join us. Celeste, also appreciate, is in Bangkok right now, where it is late at night. It's about 11 or 12 hours ahead of the east coast of the U.S., so it's an extra bonus that we have her. Celeste, just a little bit of background. Celeste has a very unique story. She came from Oklahoma, Texas area, has a degree in social work, but very involved early on in helping people in dangerous, at-risk populations, and recognized that, you know, where there's a tremendous need, unbelievable need, when she discovered what's happening in Thailand. And about 10 years ago or so now, Celeste made the move, jumped to Thailand, and has been there started an amazing organization, Tatan Naam, which I think Celeste will pronounce it a little bit better than I did. But Celeste, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a couple minutes. How did you get to Thailand? Tell us about you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey guys. Yes, like Brian said, I grew up in Oklahoma and did counseling, worked with survivors of sexual trauma, rape victims, things like that in Texas, and really had a heart for people in prostitution. And so moved to Thailand in 2007 and worked with the organization that helped Thai women come out of prostitution, and then started meeting more and more transgendered sex workers and young guys in prostitution, and there was no organizations helping young males or transgendered. And so we started an organization in 2009 that focused on helping those guys get out of prostitution and rebuild their lives. So, and I've been here since 2007. Yeah. So
amazing. Tell us a little about your organization. When you say you help transgendered males, what does that mean practically? How does that work? What does your organization do?
Yeah, so we have 3 different main layers. We do outreach in red light districts, and we have a recovery program, and then we have a job training site. And so in outreach, we go into the red light districts and build relationships, talk to them about their health, about their dreams, their future. And then as they come away from prostitution and join our recovery program, then we do counseling and social work sessions. We teach English, we teach baking, we teach barista skills. We help them finish high school diplomas. Most of them will have not finished high school. And then and then we get them into the job training program. So we have a legitimate cafe and bakery too. And so that helps them learn job skills in a very practical, safe environment so that they can hopefully work in a sustainable, legitimate job in the near future.
I'm sure you're watching the news in America, what's happening, obviously race issues, tolerance issues, xenophobia is a massive challenge in America right now. America's really having a wake-up moment. Is that a phenomenon that you also see in your work, meaning the population in Bangkok is very diverse, people from all over various countries. Is there a distinction between how your students that you work with, those who come from Thailand itself, from villages, rural, urban, or stateless people, external countries, what is the race dynamic and how does that impact what's happening on the ground?
Yes, there is so many levels of cultural issues, prejudices, stereotypes, stigmas between dark skin and light skin. For a lighter skinned Asian, they think that's more beautiful. Dark skin has a lot of connotations, and they get teased a lot and seen as dirty, seen as low income even. There's differences between hill tribes and Myanmar boys and all the different ethnicities inside of Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, all of those. So yes, I don't know. Yes, there's a big issue. They may or may not openly acknowledge that, but yes, there's lots of obstacles.
Now, the first time, many of the people who are on our call today have actually been to Thailand on a Justifi trip, which is a wonderful thing. Some of you may have met previously. Others who have met Bonita or other partners that you know well. One of the things that I found very surprising the first time I was in Thailand to learn about was that the sex trafficking that happens in Bangkok and other cities in Thailand largely are people themselves choosing to come into that situation due to poverty or other factors, as opposed to sex trafficking where I previously thought was someone is kidnapped by a gang off the street and shipped off to some foreign country. Can you describe a little bit the students you work with? Where do they come from? How do they get there? Are they happy they're there, happy they're not there? What do they connect to you? How does that work?
Yes, yeah, that's complicated because yes, like in so many ways, the majority of them working in red light districts, like the open red light districts in Thailand, we would say that they have chosen that or their family has pressured them to make that a choice. But when you actually look at their background and their story and learn more about the situation, they have had very limited options their whole life. And so I don't like using the word choice, but I also don't like using, most of them haven't been like trafficked or tricked or held against their will, those type of things. But it's this fine line of like trying so many other options and not finding good pay, good options, all of those things that they slowly get into prostitution. Most of the young guys, most of the transgender that we help have are the main breadwinners in their family. And so they're trying to make enough money for themselves to live in the city, but also be able to send money home and support, you know, numerous siblings or relatives or family members. And so that's a yeah, a thing that
When
they
you
have
say
to.
the main breadwinner, like what age group are we talking about here?
The youngest one we've helped was 13, and the oldest one we've helped was I think 51. So it's a really wide range. Our average students that we help are between 17 and 23.
Wow. And let's talk for a moment about Corona and COVID. How has that impacted society? Thailand technically is not a democracy. It's a very strict monarchy. It's a kingdom with very strict laws. When the king wants to shut everything down, they could just shut everything down, right? It's a different type of situation than what most of us are used to. So what's changed? How are people responding? How does it impact people who, the breadwinners of sex trafficking, I assume, that has a big financial impact as well.
Mhm. Yes, it in one way it was a big shock to a lot of businesses because they closed the red light districts, they closed all the bars down on March 18th, and the Thai government didn't give any notice to the bar workers. And so a lot of the non-Thai bar workers, so a lot of the Burmese and the Lao guys, weren't even paid from March 1st to March 18th. And so they didn't get that month pay, and then they didn't have any warning to like save money and prepare for that. And they thought it was going to be closed for till, you know, the first part of April or something, and then now it's just been extended and extended. So the bars haven't reopened. So they've been unemployed, without money, literally without money, and without money to send home, without food. Um, you know, and so that's been 2.5, 3 months now. So there's a lot of desperation. Told Brian the other day, there's probably easily 10,000 to 100,000, they're saying, sex workers that have been laid off. And then all other, you know, like low income type jobs, a lot of those have been shut down too. And it's just this ripple effect going out into villages and into Myanmar, Laos, all the surrounding Asian countries. Like we're being hit really hard economically, and yeah, so many are without jobs right now. So that's what our operations drastically. So our outreach is now like frontline relief and sending out food and sending antiviral meds to different people who are stuck in villages, unable to travel, doing a lot of medical things. And then like all our recovery classes is like this. Now we're doing things online with a lot of students versus being face-to-face for a counseling session or a social work session, that type thing.
Do you see that the government is responsive? Is there health care there? What about in the villages? Is there infrastructure to help people? Like what's the response? I mean, you're one person, you have a nice organization, and like you just said, there's between 10 and 100,000 sex workers who are now out of work. That's in Bangkok, or that's the whole country?
I think that's just in Bangkok. So yeah, there's so many more.
Right, so hundreds of thousands of sex workers who are the primary breadwinners for their families, and this is a ripple effect impacting millions of people across the country. It sounds like. So is the Thai government responsive? They have their act together. There's like testing and healthcare for corona.
Yes, there's testing and healthcare. In a lot of ways, I think the government has responded well, and they've really put a lot of precautions in place and really helped people be safe. I think like government help. So people who were legitimately employed, like the employer registered them for government insurance, for example, or Social Security, then those workers were able to collect 5,000 baht per month for support, and that's basically about 150 US. But the majority of the bar workers are not legitimately entered into the social work system. And so, especially if you're non-Thai. So if they weren't Thai, they didn't get any type of government bonus or package. They were basically stranded, and the employers themselves didn't give money. For the Thais that were like the bar owner actually signed them up for Social Security or like registered that they were hired, they were able to collect. But they're saying it's less than 5% of bar workers had any type of government help, if that makes sense. So
Wow. Pretty unbelievable. Tell us a little bit more about your organization. The people you work with, you run a cafe. Tell us about your cafe.
Yeah, so we have this little bitty cafe, bakery in the middle of the city. And yeah, it's just a fun little place where they can start from scratch and start over. We keep the name, we try not to connect the name of our cafe to our foundation because we don't want old customers tracking them down. We don't want even our neighbors walking in and thinking, you know, something negative about the person behind the counter. We want them to have a fresh start. And so, yeah, it's a fun place and safe place to learn and get skills. We're not great with business, you know, so even the COVID has hit us hard, you know, in that regard, because we used to like rent our space to events and have trainings and have different people come in. And so the rental income really helped sustain the business. But now, like, you know, they have to sit one person per table. And so we're not having a lot of public, you know, neighbors come in. Technically, we're only allowed to open like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So we're gonna try to get our business going again. But yes, that's our cafe.
Right. So the cafe's workers, you're saying from the back, the bakers and the cooks and the baristas and the cash register, everything are all your students, your success stories who managed to learn English and
our staff. Yeah. So the staff are trained to mentor them and teach them all the skills. And then our students, yeah, will work a 3 to 4 hour shift per day as they're doing counseling and having other classes during the day.
Amazing. A few people are texting me on the side here. I know this is a big topic and we're can only scratch the surface in a couple of minutes, but can you explain a little bit about how sex work became such a huge phenomena in Thailand? the scope you're talking about, you mentioned you're talking hundreds of thousands of sex workers in a country that's, there's 50 million people or so living in Thailand. It's a big country, but it's definitely disproportionate, obviously. Do the government schools try to prevent it? Is it legal? Is it encouraged? What is the Thai Buddhist religion? What's their take on it? From a Western mindset, it's very hard to understand how this could be such a big phenomenon.
Yeah. I should send you my PowerPoint later or something.
I know. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes, so give us a little soundbite.
It is insane how all the different cultural and historical facts within Thailand have played out into why prostitution and red light districts are such a huge part of Thailand. And Thailand's history, basically around the Vietnam War. Before that, Thai men, it was, if you're familiar with King and I and Siam and that history, like the king himself would have multiple wives, and that was a show of power and a show of masculinity. And so a lot of Thai men were allowed to have multiple wives and concubines and all those things for generations and generations. And then when the Vietnam War hit and American soldiers and so many soldiers were going into Pattaya for rest and recreation, there was literally newspaper ads that would go out all over Thailand and say, oh, if you want a man who won't cheat on you, or if you want to catch a soldier to be a husband, then like come down to Pattaya. And so there was this mass group of just young women from all over Thailand, like going down into Pattaya and trying to find a soldier as a husband, because they thought they wouldn't cheat on them, they'd be more financially secure. And so it just became this huge issue where Thai men were the far bigger participants involved in prostitution. But then it became this huge industry to tourists too. And so the Thai government, you'll get mixed messages where the Thai government says it's illegal, prostitution's illegal. But because red light districts are considered entertainment plazas and prostitution isn't taking place inside that entertainment plaza, supposedly, then, then it's somehow okay to happen that way. And I should send you some statistics later, but yeah, the national, the income every year, like the tourist industry is such a high statistic of that. Like I want to say like 60% of the national income comes from tourism, and 70% of that 60% is directly from the sex trade. And so instead of the government using like all these beaches and all the glorious, beautiful areas of Thailand as a part of tourism and income, they sadly participate in letting the sex industry be a huge money maker for them.
Wow, it's really amazing. We have a couple of minutes left. We have 5 minutes left or so. Maybe just tell us a little bit more specifically about the group, the population that you work with, the men and the transgender community that you work with. How did that come to be, and why specifically that particular niche?
Yeah. I could talk forever about this, but almost every region of Thailand will have different superstitions and different cultural implications that happen in the family dynamics. And so when I moved here in 2007, I was meeting a lot of young biological boys that had been raised to be female. And one part of it was religion, where the young mothers from the village would take their child to the Buddhist monk, the head monk in the village, and the monk would say, oh, well, this child has a female spirit. So like the spirit is more important than the anatomy. So raise this child to be female. And the women would just believe the head monk, and so that it would become this this weird kind of very different from what you see happening in the US, or someone who is identifying as a trans and feels more like the other gender, whatever that is. I wasn't seeing that piece play out in Thai culture. And so, and also in Isan culture, especially the northeast part of Thailand, they see the daughter, as the financial provider. And so because there's not a good retirement fund, there's not good social services for the older generations, the female is the one who's sending money home every month, taking care of the family, where the son is supposed to marry and financially take care of the new family, right? And so the daughter is the responsible one, the one that like takes care of mom and dad. And so we were seeing families that had all sons, and so they would watch which son was the most loyal to mom and would choose this one to be the female, to be the daughter. And that was a whole nother piece that I never seen in any culture previously. And so that it really, it kind of shook me and said, okay, like, there's so many transgendered who were working in the bars that have been raised to be female from the age of 2, from the age of 3 years old. And so they're presenting as female in this bar. And then customers, foreign men, thought that they were being tricked and deceived. And so a lot of violent things were happening to the transgendered. And a lot of the nonprofits that were working with females didn't know how to help transgendered, right? And so that was just this whole, a lot of nonprofits were faith-based and had good intentions, but that's the weird category of people that we don't know how to help type thing. And so it really shook my heart, because it's like, okay, whatever reason, if they were raised to be female, or if in high school they decided they wanted to be female, there was all these obstacles that have like boxed them in so that they couldn't get a legitimate job, they couldn't finish education, they couldn't there was these cultural pressures and expectations on them that box them in from succeeding. And so that is what pulled my heartstrings, I guess, because I didn't see anyone helping them. And so that's where we really felt like, no, that something needs to be done, and someone needs to walk alongside them and show them their value.
Very, very powerful. Celeste, in our final moment here, can you share us with a positive story? Tell us something good happening. Give us a little uplifting finish here.
Oh dear. It just started pouring, so I may lose you. Sometimes our internet goes out when it starts raining. Through all of this COVID craziness, we've had three guys from Myanmar join and 2 guys from Laos join, and we've never been able to like have that many young guys at one time. So before we had more transgendered, and now we have these young guys who are able to get a fresh start and a good start. And it's more complicated because now we have English and Thai and Burmese and Lao, and we have a Hill tribe language. And so translating and communicating is definitely a challenge, but they're really cool guys. The youngest is 17, and the oldest is, I think, 27. And it's just really nice to see them like start talking about their dreams and start talking about their hopes for something different. So.
Okay, Celeste, thank you so much. It's so inspirational and so fascinating. In a time when the world is really going through convulsions, dealing with really tremendous challenges of systemic and institutional nature, to see someone fighting on the front lines, you really are a hero. You're wearing a T-shirt there. I think is very apropos for your message and your life's work. And thank you so much for joining us. There's so much more to say. I know you just scratched the surface, which is why Justifi has spent so much time. I think now 40 trips over the last decade to Thailand, and we're looking forward as soon as safety and security allow for us to come back. So I wish everyone a great week, and everyone should be safe and healthy. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week for next week's Power Hour.
Bye, guys.